Hello, Joe Rossitter here with this Native Instruments tutorial video. Taking its name from the world's most famous drum machine, the 808 is a colloquial term for the recognisable booming bass sound heard in hip-hop, trap, R&B, pop and electronic genres. Modern 808s go beyond the straight-up use of drum machine samples, so in this video I'll show you how to craft a few different 808 flavours for use in all styles of dance music. I'll be working with deep, low-frequency sounds in this tutorial, so listening on good quality monitor speakers or headphones is advised. To begin, let's look at how the original Roland TR-808 drum machine synthesizes its kick drum with a self-oscillating filter. To follow along, call up any synth plugin that features a filter capable of self-oscillation. You can always pick one with a fixed architecture, but I've built this basic setup using the Monarch filter within the modular REAKTOR Blocks environment. So as long as your chosen filter can self-oscillate, crank resonance up high and the filter will output a sine tone, the pitch of which is governed by the filter's frequency. Modern 808s are often saturated to give the mid-range presence on small speakers. I'll turn up feedback to give the sound weight and aggression. It's just a basic sine tone at the minute, there's not much punch in this sound yet. So to get that distinctive front-end bump, I'll use a tight envelope to modulate filter frequency, and therefore this tone's pitch, over time. To do that here in REAKTOR Blocks, I'll route this envelope module's output into the filter's mod B input. Turning up the cutoff's mod B amount now applies this modulation. Carefully sculpt the envelope and adjust the envelope mod amount to dial in a sharp downwards shape. That will create this signature kick style attack. And I've set the amplitude envelope's release to quite a high value to get that lengthy bass heavy tail. Currently, even though I'm playing notes right the way across my MIDI keyboard, this tone's pitch is remaining the same. So to get around this and play the filter tone chromatically, you'll want to set up filter key tracking within your synth. To do that here and govern filter frequency by MIDI note input, I'll cable this note in module's pitch output into the filter's mod A input and apply modulation. The sound's pitch now changes when I play up and down the keyboard. So I've used a self-oscillating filter to output a sine tone, but you can simply start with a sine wave. I've got this audio file of a raw sine wave loaded into KONTAKT, which is a sampler. You can, of course, use a synthesizer to output a sine wave if you prefer. Like any bass sound, 808s should be monophonic, so set your synth or sampler's voicing to monophonic. Here in KONTAKT I'll set voices to 1, and this prevents notes from overlapping. Take a look at my amplitude envelope settings that I've dialed in here. There's a fast attack, a medium to long decay, and the release setting is really important because that allows the sine wave's tail to ring out like an 808 bass typically does. And then again, I'm going to use another envelope to shape the pitch response of the sine wave to get that distinctive attack. A pure sine wave lacks harmonics and tone, and therefore won't cut through on phones, laptops and smaller speakers. Distortion or saturation will create upper harmonics to help give the bass presence. Here I'm going to turn on 2 fairly subtle stages of saturation within KONTAKT. And for even more precise 808 pitch shaping, you can always use two envelopes, one to create a more gradual downwards bend, and then a second tighter envelope to introduce a snappier click. So we've looked at a couple of ways to create basic 808 style tones, but modern hip-hop 808s are a little more finessed. They're usually a combination of a short punchy bass drum, which provides the beats driving kick drum element, and that's then combined with a sub-bass layer that sits underneath, working in unity with the kick to create a forceful kick and bass combo. So here's my example track without a kick or a bass in the mix. First, I'll use a sampler to trigger this short, tight, punchy kick drum sample. The sparse kick notes are interplaying with the snare and percussion to drive the rhythm track along. Now I'll bring in my saturated sine wave sample from KONTAKT. Again, you don't have to use a sample, you can always use a sine wave straight out of a synth if you like. And here are the MIDI notes I'm using to trigger this sine layer. They're pretty much mirroring the kick, but I've added extra notes at different pitches that work within the groove. And of course, these sub-notes are following the chord change in the track, whereas the main kick sample stays at a constant pitch. The sub's MIDI notes are short, but as before, a lengthy release setting for the amplitude envelope lets the tail ring out for a while. Now it's time to get the kick and sub layers working together. When two similar sounds collide at the same point in time, especially bass elements, undesirable phase cancellation can occur, so both the kick and sub-bass's amplitude over time is key. As the kick drum has plenty of front-end punch, I don't want the sub-bass layer to mask that aspect of the kick. So using the sub's amplitude envelope within KONTAKT, I'll dial in a slightly slower attack, just to curve its front end off a bit and allow the kick to come through. The tail of my punchy kick drum is as short as possible while still having enough impact on its own. If the kick's tail is too long and boomy, it will collide with the sub-bass layer to create mess and flab in the low end. Another good trick is to delay the sub-bass notes a little later in time, a few milliseconds after the kick, so the slower attack and time displacement make maximum room for the kick's transient to punch through before the sub-layer extends out. But sometimes you'll want the sub-bass to keep its attack and punch when heard in isolation, so another option is to use sidechain compression to lower the sub-bass's volume and make space only when each kick fires. The aim here is to invisibly lower the sub's level a touch without any obvious volume pumping. The kick and bass are now working pretty well in tandem, so now let's focus on tone a bit more. Despite the mild KONTAKT saturation I added earlier, I reckon a touch more characterful drive will add even more weight and flavour. Driver is great for this kind of assertive distortion, so I'll use that on the sub-layer, just to drive it a little harder. To glue the kick and bass, I'll group them together to a single bus, then apply another subtle round of driver to gently distort the kick and bass together as one. Often several stages of gentle saturation flavours all stacked up can sound a bit more classy and smooth than just one large helping. If required, you can use a transient shaper to boost the kick's attack a little in the mix, to give it more crack. From here you can get even more creative with distortion, stereo width and processing. I'm sending the sub-bass to a return track in parallel, and I'll now apply distortion, high-pass filtering, chorus and compression to this new layer. This gives the sub even more upper frequency content, width and personality. Processing the parallel signal gives you the freedom to get more experimental. Try bit crushing, chorusing, flanging, phasing, or pretty much any creative effects to completely customize your 808 tone. Guitar rig's a great choice for this type of assertive parallel processing. That's it for this video. A lot of this is down to personal taste. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. Sometimes your processing will work perfectly, and other times it can sound horrible, so it's your job to test out various processing setups and find something that suits the sounds you're using in any given track. So make sure you take our concepts further to craft your own 808 kick and bass combinations. Until next time, thanks for watching.